and Ben Edwards.
Very much, Matt. Yeah, we're looking forward to 2 sessions of free practice coming up this morning. Our banks of monitors here in front of us giving us all the information. John, conditions look good. Of course, it's an earlier start today. Temperatures will be that little bit lower. We saw the Bridgestones working well yesterday morning, then it went the way of Michelin. We might see that same sort of transfer today.
Well, we've got a track temperature of 18 degrees. That's a lot down on what we saw on Friday. Nevertheless, Michelin and Bridgestone will be out running tyres, which they will then have to decide will be their tyre choices for qualifying later this afternoon and, of course, for the Grand Prix. And it's always, as ever, a critical choice for both tyre companies and teams as to which way they go. But we did see stunning times in practice on Friday. 2 drivers already, David Coulthard and Juan Pablo Montoya, under last year's pole, and Michael Schumacher and Kimi Räikkönen just below or just above that pole time. So these 2 45-minute sessions, as ever, for me, one of the best parts of a Grand Prix weekend. But the lead into qualifying here is going to be a cracker. The wind direction actually has changed marginally. It's now blowing into the faces of the cars as they come down that final straight. So keep an eye out on the data screen, that's on page 5, to see if there's any difference in the top speeds. The highest we saw yesterday was Felipe Massa at a monstrous 331 kilometres per hour.
Yeah, it's very impressive top speeds. The speed trap situated just before the final corner, and we'll keep an eye on those speeds. Again, we might not see them quite as high today with that change in wind direction. But the weather conditions pretty good. There's a little bit of hazy cloud around, but hopefully that's going to burn off fairly quickly, and we should be on for another glorious day of sunshine, as we saw here on Friday. Michael Schumacher wasn't fastest in the end yesterday, 3rd fastest, and just looking there at the little fins on the front of the Ferrari, some little aerodynamic revisions for Ferrari, as we've seen for many of the other cars up and down the pit lane so far this weekend. Schumacher and Barrichello had certainly set the pace in the first session of free practice yesterday. Barrichello coming out slightly on top, but there's some interesting posters around for Eddie Irvine, and yes, that's right, slow arrows or fast Minardi. The poor old Jaguars finding themselves towards the back of the field, although slightly better yesterday with De La Rosa in 11th place.
And I think part of what helped Jaguar was, first of all, the Michelin tyre is working particularly well here this weekend, but also the nature of the racetrack. It's all about acceleration and braking, and it's not as technical as other circuits that we've been to. So therefore, maybe it's a slightly false performance that we're seeing from Jaguar, and they're still praying, hoping that when they get to Silverstone with the revised aerodynamic package, that this is going to make them, or help them make that enormous leap forward. I hope they're not holding their breath too long.
Well, there's Mr. Michelin Man, and Michelin seemed to come on strong in that second session, with Coulthard setting the pace at the end of the day, and Montoya looking very quick. Peter, I think you wanted to add something about this tyre battle today.
Oh, that's right, Ben. Yes, as you say, as John said, the Michelin's looking very good. And one of the reasons that they're relatively confident is that we saw quite a lot of blisters on the Bridgestone tyres yesterday, on the rear tyres particularly. Now, talking to the Bridgestone people, actually they're not particularly worried about that, because they make the point that with groove tyres, such as those we have in Formula 1 today, the blister is very, very confined. It's confined, if you like, to that groove. It's a bit like a 747. You've got 4 engines, it's great, but if you lose one, it still flies pretty well. If you get a blister on one groove, it isn't actually the end of the world. And Felipe Massa, who you're just talking about, right behind me here, his car, actually did 35 laps yesterday with a blistered rear. So it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out. Of course, as the circuit picks up grip, they slide less, and maybe there's they're less prone to blistering, but at the same time, blisters are a function of heat. And if it's very hot, maybe we'll see that in the race affecting results.
Great, well, thank you very much for that, Peter. Yes, I noticed on one of the sheets that were produced at the end of the day yesterday, Pierre Ducasquier was talking about the fact that sometimes a softer tyre can blister less because it's not sliding across the surface of the tarmac so much. A harder compound may slide more, and therefore then you get more blisters. So it really is a complicated old business.
Well, it's a real alchemist's dream on one hand, a nightmare on the other. But of course, the nature of a road circuit or a temporary circuit such as the circuit Gilles Villeneuve is, it's like Monte Carlo, it's like Melbourne, it's like other racetracks that are only visited rarely, where you get a very, very dirty, a very green racetrack. And with a soft compound, even though the harder of those 2 tyres is still a very soft compound, nevertheless, on those slick or green conditions, the tyre isn't biting on the racetrack, it's skidding across it. And that in part can generate surface temperature, not core temperature, which is what the tyre companies need.
Well, Mark Webber was very slow coming out of the pits there. I think he must have some sort of problem because everybody had to find a way past. Kimi Raikkonen was the first to find a way past him, so he's charged off on this first installation lap. They'll have had fresh engines put in the cars for today. We saw some good straight line speeds for the McLarens yesterday, and perhaps we're seeing some improvements from them this weekend in terms of power output. Giancarlo Fisichella was impressive, particularly in the first free practice session. He was third in that, but he dropped down to 12th by the end of the second session. Hoping for another good result here this weekend, as Fisichella's had plenty of good finishes here in the past. Kimi Raikkonen getting some support and cheers, and good to see plenty of fans even at this early hour. Just gone 9 o'clock in Montreal. Still plenty of people here to lend their support to the Grand Prix fraternity.
Indeed, and turning out, some of them sitting rather bravely in T-shirts, whereas Peter Windsor on the pit lane, well wrapped up. And of course the pit lane at this point of the day is very much in the shade, so chilly on the pit lane side of the garages, much warmer on the hospitality side, and I don't mean that literally, I mean that is what the temperature is like. But just talking about Giancarlo Fisichella, 2 races now consecutively in the points, and a real rescue for Jordan, having had a very difficult start to the season. But coming to a circuit here in Canada where Jordan scored their first points in 1991, and a circuit that is a real favourite to the Jordan team, and they're looking to try and gain or capitalise on that build of reliability and confidence and get into the points once again.
Absolutely, yes. It has been a very successful track for them, this particular one, with Andrea De Cesaris and Bertrand Gachot getting those first points for the Jordan team. They also got their first ever double podium here in 1995, the year that John Alesi took his one and only Grand Prix victory. That was at the wheel of a Ferrari, of course. Michael Schumacher has gone on to take a great deal of success, 6 pole positions in the last 8 races here in Montreal, so he really is the man to beat in qualifying later on this afternoon. He has a tremendous record. He's only once been off the front row, of course, this year, and that was in Monaco last time out, so you have to say Ferrari will be very much in the battle for pole position this afternoon.
Yes, and I think the confidence that Ferrari expressed in their team notes at the end of the day, they weren't really getting involved in a battle with McLaren or Williams as to who's going to be quickest on Friday. They're not really interested in that. What they're doing is getting all the work carried out that they had scheduled. Now that was slightly sort of set off the rails by Michael Schumacher clobbering the wall towards the end of the first time session on Friday morning, but nevertheless very little damage to the car, virtually only one toe link on the rear suspension, and the car was out for the entire 1 hour of Friday's second practice session.
We'll just be trying to listen in a little bit on the team radios as we go through this free practice session. We'll get the odd words now and then from race engineers and from drivers themselves as they try and work out the best way to set these cars up for this fast circuit, slightly bumpy in places, all about great braking and good traction.
Now, would you imagine a local restaurateur in Montreal would actually be a Grand Prix driver? Well, that's what Jacques Villeneuve is, because he has got a shareholding in a restaurant in town, and he doesn't do any special deals to any of his teammates or to his competitors, but nonetheless I gather it's pretty popular, and it's something Jacques decided he wanted to become involved in and put something back into his home province, which is of course Quebec in Canada. I was going to say in France, it could be in France, but it is very much the speaking part of Canada, and that's one of the few links that he still has with the land in which he was born.
That's right, and hugely popular here. You know, he's never had a particularly good result. The best result he had when he was driving for Williams, he finished second to Damon Hill. And there we are, just listening to a little bit of the radio. Second to Damon Hill on his first run here in Canada, but since then he's had a couple of races where he's run well and pushed hard, but quite often he's pushed too hard. He's been involved in a number of incidents, crashing at the last corner the same year that Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill did that as well. Also took Ralf Schumacher out a couple of years ago when it got wet later in the race. So he pushes hard, sometimes a little too hard in Canada. Let's keep an eye on him this weekend with the revisions that have been made to this car.
And we heard from Jeffrey Willis a little earlier that this is just the very first stage of a lot of upgrades this car will go through between now and the end of the season. But of course, in tandem with that, Jeffrey Willis is going to be looking at the layout for his 2003 car, and basically he's saying, well, there will be nothing other than probably the stickers on the car and the fact that it's got a gearbox and it's got an engine. It's going to be a completely different philosophy of design, And also, interestingly, talking about the Honda engine, he's quite freely saying, we have got Honda engines next year. Well, what's happening with Jordan?
Yes, we're still to find that one out. And of course, John, it might be under a different name. There's still talk that there might be a name change for that team. It's all gone a bit quiet, but certainly it has been talked about. Even David Richards referred to it slightly earlier in the year that they would make a decision whether to change the name or not. That's all gone a bit quiet, but that could be something to listen out for.
Well, now that David, of course, has taken over, many things may well happen sooner or later.
That was a slightly strange...
I can hear you there. I didn't talk to you anywhere else, so...
Jacques sounding remarkably laid back this morning, isn't it? Jock Clear checking radio communication with him. Well, I think so, he says. He sounds like he's only just woken up, really, this morning, doesn't he?
Well, it's a bit early for the lad, you know. I mean, he's in his hometown, got his own restaurant, got some of his chums around, and he may have had a fairly entertaining evening last night, but, of course, it is an early start Saturday morning, and really the weekend from now on is a lot of early starts.
They've had a lot of problems this year, the BAR team. Just taking a little look here at Barrichello. One of the main problems they've had, reliability-wise, has been a clutch problem. They've got revised transmission gearbox this weekend. Peter, I think they're still experimenting a little bit, aren't they, with the clutch mechanism on that car?
Well, yes, actually, this is the first time they've run it. It was on the spare car yesterday, and of course you can't run the spare car on Fridays, and you can't even run it now, but they fit it to the two race cars for today. And in fact, what it is, despite what Jeffrey was saying about moving forward, in fact, as I understand it, they've gone back to last year's clutch mechanism because Honda wanted to have a very strong, in terms of structural rigidity, piece between the clutch and the engine. And so they've been running quite a large bearing in that area, and they've gone back to last year's, reversed it, and a much smaller bearing, which should give them more reliability, they hope. But talking about engines in general, it was interesting talking to Jarno Trulli after Monaco. This is a different subject, I know, but perhaps you guys might like to just chat about this. He was saying that he was losing ground at Monaco in the opening stages of the race behind the BMW, going up the hill and coming out of Le Portier, going into the tunnel. In other words, on the power sections of the circuit. So that's another area, just talking about Renault now, it's another area where Renault, of course, need to improve. He said just on basic acceleration on a slow circuit like Monaco, the Renault was losing a lot to Ralf Schumacher.
Interesting comments, and of course here, John, acceleration is pretty crucial, particularly out of that Casino hairpin, which leads on to the longest straight.
Well, it is a circuit about power, and they've got effectively two hairpin bends and two straights with a couple of wiggles somewhere in the middle. It is a power circuit, and horsepower will definitely benefit you here this afternoon. And whether you decide to use that horsepower and go quickly down the straight, or whether you decide to use it as most teams, I think, will do, particularly people like Ferrari and BMW, they'll use that horsepower to drag more aerodynamic downforce to enable them to brake later, get on the power earlier, and of course in the one or two corners where they're running maybe above 100 miles an hour, to just generate more grip, more downforce. And in fact, all around the circuit, if you can carry more wing and not hurt your top speed or your lap time, that's got to be the way to go.
Well, a revision to the aerodynamics both front and rear for Toyota this weekend. Quick look down into the pit lane. Jean Todt involved in discussions with Peter Sauber. But Alan McNish getting his first experience of this track. Toyota had a reasonably promising day yesterday. Mika Salo in particular putting in fastest time in that second session of free practice. Michael Schumacher using the launch control, I think, at the end of the pit lane, just doing a little practice start. Let's just keep an eye on him down there. There we are. We watch him just releasing his finger off the button and launching the Ferrari off the line. You know the mistake that Jenson Button made in Monaco? We saw him jump the start. He put that down purely to finger trouble, I'm afraid. He just released the button too soon.
Well, it's a very tense place, the grid in Monte Carlo, and a human error like that, does happen. Of course, Jenson, now a fully professional racing driver and a highly professional team like Renault, would pretty much have to own up to that one, because all the telemetry would indicate precisely what did go wrong. So there's no point in saying, well, it wasn't my fault, guys, when everybody will know in the team precisely what did happen. But nevertheless, honesty is a very important key in a driver relationship with the team. And if you try to always offload responsibility onto somebody else, your position in the team will not be very strong.
No, and these days, more so than in the past, perhaps, the team has such a close idea of what is going on through the hundreds, literally hundreds of sensors that are on the Formula One car these days, and they can really tell most of the story themselves, so the driver really has to own up when he makes a mistake. McNish on a flying lap at the moment. Michael Schumacher just going out and making the installation lap, checking all the systems are working correctly. and McNish continuing round. We've still got a long way to go, and of course this first free practice session, and this gives them an opportunity to work on race setup, particularly at the moment as we go towards the end of these sessions. They will be working more on their qualifying setup.
Well, Alan McNish gets his first maybe proper flying lap of the day, and he's still about 7/10 of a second away from what he achieved on Friday, but he spent a lot of the time in the pits. There was problems with his car, and a newcomer to the circuit losing valuable time for him, but principally for the team, and that you cannot afford with the limited amount of practicing that you have over these 2 days. Oh, Michael really giving it large going through turns 3 and 4, almost overrunning in turn 3 and compromising. Is that blue smoke or that little haze coming out from the back?
I'm not sure. We'll keep an eye on it. Look at him sliding the car around, even with the benefits of traction control. He dials out as much traction control as he can get away with and slides the car around accordingly, and always incredible confidence. We saw him hit the wall yesterday out of the last corner. He said, well, I just pushed a bit too hard, but it's important to keep pushing. He is always flat out. That's what marks him out, really. Even though he's a 4 times world champion, he never relaxes, backs off, or takes it. He is always on the limit, and you're watching him now already putting in a fairly quick lap to start off this morning's session.
But I think what you're going to see, he's going to make, this is the third sector of the lap that he's on now. I would expect to see him go quickest of all here to begin this next flying lap, and then really down to some early morning work on Saturday morning. McNish has improved to 18.831. This lap from Michael Schumacher isn't going to be that quick, but it's only 4/10 of a second away. And in fact, Michael Schumacher's time through that second sector, that third sector, was marginally down on that of Alan McNish, but nonetheless expect to see substantial improvements from Schumacher on this, his 5th lap of the day.
Rubens Barrichello wasn't quite as happy with his car yesterday. They were struggling to get the braking to his liking, and that's really the challenge here, and we quite a lot yesterday. We heard from some of the team radio as well, drivers and engineers discussing how to try and get the brake balance good with very, very heavy braking areas. 6 times the cars are being slowed from over 180 miles an hour down to about 50 miles an hour, and it only takes a Formula 1 car just over 4.5 seconds to do that. So the brakes taking a real pounding, and the heat build-up on all 4 discs, of course, absolutely crucial to getting the very best out of those brakes.
Didn't quite do a Frentzen.
Yes, that's right.
Japanese driver, really. I mean, what a torrid start to his season. And it got all the speed, just maybe needs to curb that enthusiasm. Runs probably marginally wide coming out of turn 5. Then just, I mean, he's feeling the car all the way in. He's still on the brakes. And that's the reason the car is unsettled. The back of the car just begins that process of breaking away. and then really all he's doing is trying to grab the clutch lever to ensure the engine doesn't stall, although there is an anti-stall device, but you only got 5 seconds to, once that anti-stall device is activated, to grab the clutch lever and ensure that you keep the engine running.
Well, there we are, another look at the spin from Sato, and we've seen great car control from him earlier this year, but you do have to wonder if the confidence isn't getting a little shaky. 2 massive accidents in recent races. Of course, last time in Monaco he moved out of the way of teammate Fisichella under team orders, and that caused the accident, but some £1 million worth of damage, according to Eddie Jordan, has been done by Takuma Sato in the last 2 Grand Prix.
Well, Ralf Schumacher doing a little run. This is his first serious lap of the morning. He's done 3, this is his 4th lap, and already looks like he's going to find himself up at the top with brother Michael. Michael's still quickest on a 1:17.793. A long way from the 15:407 we saw from Coulthard on Friday. Nevertheless, track still green. It takes maybe 15-20 minutes to bring the track back to the level, and the temperatures, of course, low this morning as well. And Ralf Schumacher does go quickest by just over a second, and that's a substantial bunch of time.
Yeah, that's an impressive first run for Ralf Schumacher, the winner here last year. And he's being watched closely from the Ferrari pit. Rubens Barrichello just keeping an eye on Ralph's car out there at the moment, and you can do the same if you want to. He's still on the onboard channel number 6, riding just behind that front wing area of Ralf Schumacher's car if you want to ride with him. Meanwhile, we'll turn our attention to Enrique Bernoldi, because he's just gone 3rd fastest. That's a good effort for the Brazilian, who once again was unlucky yesterday. The car broke down on him, so he lost a good deal of setup time. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was going pretty well, sorting out his brake balance problems, but Bernoldi now needs to get some laps under his belt.
Well, he's done a very good job so far, and let's see if Bernoldi can improve. He's showing personal bests on 1st and 2nd sectors, so 1:17.8 is his previous best. He improves by about 3/10 to a 17.5 as Heinz-Harald Frentzen, his teammate, watches the screen. He's still in the pits. And now Juan Pablo Montoya. And Montoya has also, he's completed 3 laps, so this is going to be his really first quick lap. Highest speed in that 1st sector, personal best, 1st and 2nd as you'd expect, and in fact just a fraction away from the theoretical fastest lap, which is the combination of everybody's time so far. And I would not be surprised to see Montoya take that away from teammate Ralf Schumacher.
Across the line he goes. Indeed, he is fastest by nearly half a second, but the time's still a little way off where we saw them get down to yesterday. 1:15.4 was the pace yesterday. Let's just take a look at the replay. Did he make a little mistake in the middle sector of the lap?
Oh, he did. Into 6 and 7. Now he lost a stack of time. I mean, he's probably lost the best part of 3/4 of a second, maybe half a second. So that driving area, you can see Berger and Tyson looking at the screen and having a little chat about it and saying, oh, no problem. I mean, already a 16.2, that would have been a 15.7 without doubt.
Yeah, so that would have been a better lap from Montoya. And in fact, that was the same corner that we saw Sato in trouble. Villeneuve just moving out of the way of both Jordans. Sato spun it up there. Montoya just ran wide, pushed wide into the corner, managed to gather it all together and continue to produce a quick time. Fast enough to go fastest overall. You're watching Giancarlo Fisichella and the Italian. Let's just watch him through this slippery corner. There was definitely a little lack of grip there, but he sorts it out nicely.
I just wonder, is Fisichella, maybe this is being too analytical about it, but is Fisichella leading Sato around to give him an idea of break points, of entry and exit lines for the corner, trying to help Shooter, his young teammate? I mean, they're not just running around in tandem because it's good for the team. I just wondered, maybe Jordan said, look, give him a lap, let him follow you around and see what you do. Don't follow that particular line in turn 10. That was not ideal, but nonetheless, sometimes it does help if a driver's getting confused and not really quite comfortable with what has taken place.
Yes, I think Sato followed him on that wide line in. They missed the apex. Montoya's just put in an even quicker lap. Montoya now down into the 1:15, so it's only half a second off the best from yesterday now. And Montoya really showing great pace in the Williams in the early stages of this morning's free practice. Fisichella and Sato, I think you could be right, John, following each other around for a couple of laps here, and perhaps Sato getting a little masterclass from one of the consistently quick drivers around this track. Olivier Panis slithering his way into the casino hairpin. Says he likes this track despite the fact he broke his legs here a few years ago. Still enjoys coming to Montreal. The French language spoken considerably here, of course, so he feels quite at home and enjoys the circuit itself despite the accidents some years ago. Now, I believe that we can speak to Eddie Jordan. Eddie, can you hear us all right?
I can, perfectly. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. Well, we were just wondering, watching your two men go around, is Giancarlo actually trying to show Sato the way around this morning?
Oh, we wouldn't dream of doing something like that. I mean, that sounds as if giving somebody an advantage. Well, it's his first time here, Taku, and I think we kind of lost our way a little bit yesterday. We did carry some very, very high fuel loads. And in the morning, Giancarlo was third quickest. So obviously, Giancarlo is a bit of a star around here in particular. So from that perspective, yeah, any help we can give to any member of the team is to our advantage.
Tell us about Taku and how he's approaching the races now. I mean, he's had a tough time, and it's not all been his own fault. How have you spoken to him? What have you told him to concentrate on approaching this race?
Well, it's easy to be, understanding and to try and see exactly what the best we can get for him. I have no doubt about his ability. I think he's a very talented up-and-coming driver. It's his first year. It is a daunting experience. I think us who live in Europe don't quite understand maybe the height and the expectation that the Japanese people are putting on him. And as a result, he's having to deal with all of that as well. I'm absolutely certain that he will start scoring points quite soon. His race speed, particularly in the race, is as good as you can possibly expect. He needs to tidy up, I think, a little bit and concentrate on the qualifying. So we are giving him more and more qualifying runs in the test sessions that we're doing, so in a hope that he'd be able to, find it less daunting when it comes to that one lap, miracle lap that you have to make.
Eddie, it's John here. Could you put a nail in the coffin of the rumour that was doing the rounds Thursday, Friday, that Eddie Irvine may be rejoining your team next year?
Oh, John, that's a little classic that you've just picked out of the wood. I thought it was already dead, to be truthful. I have never spoken to Eddie Irvine in recent years about it, certainly about motor racing. We talk about everything else, and we never talk about each other working for each other again. So I think Stan and the Sun kind of alluded to something. Eddie has been very good, in fact finished on the podium here in 1994, so we've been good for each other. But as to the future, I think I've nailed my colours to the mast, and where I want to go next year, I believe that the drivers will be unchanged.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie, for joining us from the pit wall there, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we're riding on board with another Honda-powered car here. This is the BAR Honda, of course. Jacques Villeneuve looking at the front suspension on the car.
But Ben, while we were talking to EJ, Rubens Barrichello slipped in a quick one. Not only a quick one, but one that was quicker than Coulthard from yesterday. Coulthard 1:15.407, Rubens Barrichello 1:15.296.
Well, that shows you that Ferrari are certainly going to be on the pace. And look, Coulthard has come up to second ahead of Montoya. So Coulthard again showing the pace from yesterday. Panis has come up to fourth. And we're riding there with Jacques Villeneuve, his teammate, as the BAR team bosses and technical director both watching closely. Villeneuve will hopefully move up on this lap. He's down in 16th at the moment, but he's improving on every sector so far.
And also Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Arrows. Suddenly there's about a 4 or 5 car movement. In fact, Frentzen has gone fastest of anybody in that first sector. So Frentzen, just on his 6th or 5th lap, has gone 5th quickest. He's on his 6th lap now, and clearly destined to go further up, doing a 16.266. And well, that could see the Arrows break into maybe the very high moment at 15th. We wait and see.
Great pictures once again on our digital F1 coverage here. The onboard cameras showing you the suspension working hard. There is Frentzen, and he's up on Barrichello's overall fastest time at this point.
Well, this is absolutely blinding. I mean, well, what are you going to do? I mean, I felt the Arrows was going to be a very quick car here. Right now, Frentzen en route to doing... Oh, there's a McLaren, that Raikkonen.
Yes, I think it is Raikkonen. He's just on the exit of turn 4, so this won't affect the end of Frentzen's fast lap. Let's just see, is this enough to go ahead of Barrichello? He's 5th fastest currently. He goes 2nd, and he's just a fraction, well, in fact, 4/10 of a second slower.
Yeah, Raikkonen's got it all wrong. He's tried to do a do not to get the car turning the right direction, and he's in a precarious position because that's the line cars will take on the exit out of turn 4. We're looking...
The yellows are out, of course.
Alex Wurz looking as Norbert Haug. So that's a difficult situation, and really the drivers will have to obey. They don't always do, but obey the yellow flag, because Raikkonen in a very difficult situation now, waiting for the marshals to come and push that car And this is a problem for the Finn, because if he gets outside assistance, then of course he'll not be able to continue this session.
That's right, there's still 19.5 minutes left in this session. Michael Schumacher decides it's time to clamber out, because this is going to take a few minutes to sort the problem, as Kimi Raikkonen's still there, and it looks as though it's got stuck in gear. He can't seem to select neutral. Let's just take a look and see how it happened.
Well, he got a fair bunch of curb, and that was on turn 4. Then just the car went a little bit one way, then the other way, and then you can see he just nailed the throttle to make the car spin, and he ends up in that situation. Now he's got it going, and God knows what temperature the engine's run to, having sat there for the best part of a minute and a half or longer. But he refused Marshall's assistance because he didn't want anybody to touch the car, and therefore for the 18 minutes or so of this session that are remaining, for him then to have to sit it out in the pits. And he would have been in contact at all times with the team on the pit wall.
Yes, and well, here is Alexander Wurz reacting to that spin. Just looked like he used the curb, as you said, a bit too hard on the inside. That flicked the car around. We saw Montoya have an accident like that last year here in the race itself. Raikkonen, though, surviving without damage done to the car, and hopefully be able to bring it back into the pits. So we've still got a few cars out on track. Most of them have come back in because of Raikkonen stranded, so we've got some 19 cars in the pits and 1 or 2 more heading that way.
And Joe Bayer, the technical delegate, talking to Davy Ryan of McLaren, just clarifying what was the problem. Why did it take so long for that car to be able to reverse? And there are backup devices on board, but reverse gear is a mandatory requirement in a Formula 1 car. As we watched David Coulthard just a tenth of a second away and a long way off the apex on this particular lap. Coulthard on lap 8, personal bests in first and second sectors, and we could see a small improvement. He's going to try and displace Frentzen, who is currently second, but probably Barrichello's lead time just that little bit too far away. He's going into the pits anyway. Yeah,
he's backed off, so it would have been a good lap, but he's decided against it. Fastest through the speed trap, just at that area where he's come down into the pits there, is Takuma Sato at the moment. 329 kilometers per hour ahead of Rubens Barrichello, so we're at about the 206 mile an hour mark at the moment as they come down towards that chicane.
And I think the reason why Sato is running such a high speed in relation to cars that are much faster than him is that Jordan are doing a bit of work in preparation for Sunday's Grand Prix, and they know that they can't run the levels of downforce they will run in qualifying, and they have to find out the balance of the car, the top speed, and get the driver comfortable. So they're going to use this session in particular for Sato to try and establish a good race base, and then use the second part of this 45-minute session in just over, well, it'll be about 46 minutes when it starts, to allow him then to go and do a qualifying setup and can just worry about qualifying. So the case again, the view, Kimi Raikkonen just rides that curb, the back gets away, right rear just didn't like the way that, well, he didn't even floor it, he just had the brakes on, he just brought it to a standstill, and of course then he had trouble getting the car turned round, and in fact had to wait until he could get reverse gear selected.
Let's ride with Montoya for a moment here. Again, just a little bit slippery into that turn 6 area. Now down into turn 8, so that's Montoya on track at the moment, using plenty of road. I believe that we can speak to Ron Dennis now on the pit wall there. Ron, Kimi Raikkonen's incident, can you tell us any more about that? Why was it so hard for him to get going again?
He was just waiting for the yellows to be well established before closing the line, so he was stationary in reverse gear. He was very keen that the marshals didn't actually push him, so it would be, otherwise it would have been an assist. And it was just prudent, kept an eye on the engine temperatures. Once we saw that the cars had been informed that there was a yellow by their teams, then he reversed across the line. So it was a very sort of prudent, careful decision.
Well, he's going pretty well. He's just gone across the line and gone fastest of all now. Kimi Raikkonen's gone ahead of Montoya. You must be fairly pleased with the way the car's running so far.
It's early days, and obviously reasonably quick, which is what it's all about, but under no illusions it's going to be a difficult qualifying.
Can you tell us about the improvements from Mercedes? I did read somewhere there were some upgrades this weekend. Is that the case, and are they being run for qualifying today?
Well, best ask Norbert, that's his department, but constant improvement is what we try to achieve all the time. Hopefully we've closed the gap a little bit, but it's a tough formula, as John will tell you. It's not for the faint-hearted, and we're certainly not counting any chickens.
Great, well thank you for joining us this morning from the pit wall, Ron. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Raikkonen also, look, fastest in that second sector of everybody, so this could be the first lap we see into the 1 minute 14. Raikkonen, good clean exit out of turn 13 and 14. 15 now comes across start finish line. Well, he lost a bit of time in that last sector. He was by a reasonable amount quickest in that middle sector, somewhere drifted away. Now maybe that's the situation with a set of tyres. You've got the best of the tyres on one flying lap, and you've still got a bit left up until the middle distance in the second lap. But let's look at Michael Schumacher, who's dropped all the way down now to 12th place. He's done the most laps of anybody so far today, done 13. So what he's been doing is, as we saw him do in Monte Carlo, doing quite long runs to establish a really solid baseline information for Ferrari.
Yes, and remember, you can overtake around this track, so even if you don't take pole, it's possible to win the race. Great onboard shot once again, looking at Michael Schumacher in action, and he's being watched from the Ferrari pit as well. Now let's just watch him through the chicane. This is coming up through turns 3 and 4, now through this flat-out right-hander. Just listen to the crispness of the gear change.
He also makes a change on either brake balance or mapping or something. You see his hand came down, left hand came down, made an adjustment at one of those little knobs on the steering wheel. Those lights flashing are rev limiter lights when the engine's coming up to just below the point where the limiter would cut in, and then the up change takes place.
And now up to maximum speed down here, just over 200 miles an hour at the speed trap. The speed trap's just up there before they get on the brakes. That's the fastest speed trap that we see around this track. And he now comes out through the final corner where the wall has been moved back slightly. He hit that wall a few years ago, and down into the first turn, the centre S, the left and right, with the grandstands up on the outside there, offering such a brilliant view, looking down on the cars. Oh, and off the track goes one of the Jordans, and that's
Takuma Sato.
Yeah, Takuma Sato. That was up at turn 8. So the Japanese driver, he's still struggling. He's down in 19th position, and the Jordans really do seem to be struggling a bit. Fisichella himself is down in 21st.
Well, Fisichella's done 9 laps, and a lot of those laps, well, a number of them certainly were leading Takuma Sato around. Well, it doesn't seem to have benefited the young Japanese driver too much, but we felt that what Sato was doing this morning was running for race setup rather than for a qualifying setup. He still is the fastest car down the straight, and we're looking at Kimi Raikkonen. Well, Raikkonen doesn't even come into the top 6 in terms of top speed, but in terms of lap time there's about 2.5 seconds difference. So clearly the different approaches from McLaren and Jordan as to how they go about Saturday morning's work is you're seeing it on screen.
Michael Schumacher still down in 13th place. Is he staying out for another lap? Yes, he's putting together a consistent run of laps here. This is all work for the race. This is not looking for qualifying pace, and at the moment he's just putting in some consistent laps himself. That moves him up the order. That brings him up to 8th position, and Fisichella just put in a quicker lap. That's brought him up to 7th.
Well, I think Fisichella probably had been sitting it out in the pits, maybe making some alterations, but all of a sudden there he is, about where we'd expect to see the Jordan. Between 7th and 10th I think would be a very good show.
Good effort from Olivier Panis here. He's moved up to 4th. So the track's still cleaning up, of course, as they're putting more and more laps down. The track's still getting faster and faster, and we're going to see the pole record from last year absolutely blown away. We're already ahead of it, and we haven't even worked our way through to the end of the free practice sessions. Kimi Raikkonen's car being worked on. He was fastest, and he is still fastest by just under 1/10 of a second. 3 cars at the moment at the top of the times. In fact, 5 cars, 5 different manufacturers. So we've got a good mix of cars up there at the top end of the timesheets.
Well, Rubens Barrichello now deciding he had enough of running around in 3rd place. He's gone fastest in that first sector. And just considering the lap time pole position last year, 1:15.7, there are 8 cars that are actually so far under that last year's pole time. And the 8th car is, who is it? Felipe Massa.
Felipe Massa in the Sauber. Barrichello's fast through the second sector as well. We're going to see a new fastest time for coming up. So while Michael Schumacher's working on race pace, Barrichello working slightly differently. Replay of Olivier Panis, not a problem, just ran a little wide across the grass. Shouldn't be any damage done. Look at this. This is going to be a quick lap from Barrichello.
Just going to make a clean entry and a good exit out of these final 2 curves. Oh, very nice indeed, very nice. And Barrichello equals Sato's time at 329 kilometers per hour. 1:14, what is it? 9:26.
So the first into the 1:14. Rubens Barrichello goes fastest in the morning free practice sessions here, and it looks as though Ferrari trying to re-establish themselves ahead of McLaren and Williams. It's Ferrari first, McLaren second, Williams third, BAR fourth, Sauber fifth, Arrow sixth, and then another McLaren in 7th place. A real mix of manufacturers up there in that top 6, and it could show for a good qualifying session this afternoon, as everybody seems to be close together in terms of times. Barrichello's backed off now, slowing it right down and letting other cars go past safely. That was Irvine having to get onto the bit of the dirty stuff there in passing Barrichello.
Well, Jenson Button, who's not been enjoying the best weekend so far with the Renault team, and Button's currently 14th and on a lap that is about, well, it's not going to be particularly special either. And maybe the Renault engineers are slightly concerned about that failure. We had Peter Windsor tell us that inflicted Jarno Trulli a major problem with a component. That particular component, of course, close to the end of its life, but maybe there's a feeling, a jangly feeling with the Renault engineers from now on until Sunday afternoon's Grand Prix is complete.
Well, we'll see what they can manage to do here, Renault. They've been pushing McLaren, as we know, in the Constructors' Championship, although the win for David Coulthard last time out has certainly given McLaren the advantage in that Constructors' battle. Renault themselves lying 4th in the points. Most of those points scored by Jenson Button here. Jarno Trulli did get 4th place in Monaco. There was some question about a seal that was missing on one of the electronic control units on Jarno Trulli's car after Monaco, John, but that was all cleared up and he was allowed to keep the points for 4th place.
Yeah, so it was a provisional result immediately following the Grand Prix, but it was confirmed then by the FIA technical delegate some few days later that everything was in fact as by the fingerprint that every team have to register with the FIA to ensure that all these controls are as, well, just identified. It's like a DNA of a racing car in effect.
So Jarno Trulli comes back out, but as we say, they don't seem to be as much on the pace here as we might have. Let's see what they've only done a few laps though, really, the two of them today. So Trulli will come out now to add to 7 laps that he's done so far. Let's see if they can find a little more pace. Now, Olivier Panis very aggressive on the turn-in.
Again, looking for a personal best in that first sector. Slightly down in the second, comes across the start-finish line, is 4th and remains 4th.
But Barrichello's on another quick lap. Here we are. Let's see whether this goes even faster. Yes. It does. 1:15.788. Michael Schumacher will think, well, that's good news. Our Ferrari car looks to be in good shape on its Bridgestone tyres.
And again, that is 1 second below last year's pole time. And Ferrari not yet running their car in an out-and-out qualifying setup. They will probably do that in the second of these 2 45-minute sessions, as the Schumacher brothers both sitting in their respective teams' garages, looking at the monitors, studying the information. A lot of work going around the brakes on Ralph Schumacher's Williams as Montoya comes down to turn 10.
Yeah, Ralph's been sitting in the pits for quite a while now. You're looking at Montoya. These two are tied in the World Championship, remember. They're a joint second on 27 points in the World Championship, following Monaco, and you're looking into the cockpit there of Montoya. Massa himself is on a quick lap as well at the moment. Montoya, good middle sector there. Might be a slight improvement. It's not going to be fastest overall. Oh, a little bit of correction required through that last corner. Montoya currently 3rd. Is he going to stay 3rd? No, he goes fastest. Oh, incredible. Last sector, particularly there from Juan Pablo Montoya. Despite the bit of correction through the last corner, he goes ahead of Barrichello.
Well, we're just watching down on the timing screen to see Felipe Massa's time in massive first sector time, quickest of everybody, and then nothing particularly special. And here we go on board with the young Brazilian. So this is coming down into that final right-left onto 8. Certainly it'll elevate him from his current 8th place, as long as he doesn't do anything naughty or silly on the exit. Good drive off. So the Brazilian looking to move up, maybe get into the top 4, top 5, he goes 5th.
So 5th fastest for the young Brazilian. He had a few off-track excursions yesterday. They were working on their brake balance, but they seem pretty happy in Sauber. They've had problems here in the past with brakes, but they were pretty happy with the work they did. He was just finding the track very dusty, slippery in places, and that was catching him out. Now, this was a replay of Montoya. We saw him correct from our onboard shot. Let's see what it was like from outside. Yeah, that was a nice little bit of correction through the last corner. Yeah, that was a hard lap, and he was using a very aggressive. Again, look how aggressive he... Oh, and again, nearly, the back end drifts away, has to put lock on to correct it, and of course that carries the car a further foot over to the right when you haven't got a foot space to use. But you have to do that here, John, don't you? Particularly in qualifying, and perhaps that's what they're doing now, is just getting their eye in a little bit, how much you can hit the curb, and just really building up to what's got to be a very committed lap to qualify well in Montreal. And the shock load that goes through the suspension, through the car, when you do that, it is enormous. Nevertheless, the cars are designed to withstand it, but I don't think you're doing 69 laps as aggressively as that would be the way to finish a Grand Prix. Frank Williams keeping an eye on everything, as both cars are now on track. Jacques Villeneuve, here we are, on board with the BAR Honda driver. That looks pretty clean. Oh, and he's right out to the wall. Very hard on the power, very early out of that last corner. And this puts him up to 7th place, so 1:15.541 for the Canadian.
Well, as we watch Jacques Villeneuve sawing away on the steering wheel and the team watching from the pits, Ralf Schumacher has finally gone out. He's only completed 7 laps so far this session. That is the least of anybody. The person next to him is, in fact, Felipe Massa, who's just done 8. But Ralf Schumacher, no doubt, will be very keen before the session finishes. We've just got over 2.5 minutes remaining to get a decent run in so he can then prepare for that final 45-minute session. But it's now behind Harold Frentzen, once again fastest in first sector, running in 6th place, as Michael Schumacher now decides time to go out and get that one vital last lap in.
So he heads down the pit lane onto this revised pit lane exit. Remember, they used to join onto the track just before the first corner, and off the track is Raikkonen, I think, again. That's up at turn 7, so that's a slightly further round than he was last time, but he's having a bit of a tricky time this morning getting that McLaren through the chicanes. Frentzen, meanwhile, not quite so quick through the second sector. Let's see where this puts him. Currently he's 6th. He might improve a bit, but he's not going to go fastest overall here. Frentzen across the line, he goes 4th.
Well, that's a good effort from Arrows to get 4th in this company. It depends, of course, once again on this whole issue of fuel and what tyres, but here's the man I want to keep an eye on, Ralf Schumacher. His time is about 2/10 down in that first sector, but we've seen as the lap continues that the time comes from the tyres. So watch for this second sector. We'll be coming up to the conclusion of it very shortly. On the exit, and he makes an error just a little bit too wide. Still maintains a reasonable amount of speed through the exit, so he's got a personal best still. But he's about, you're talking about hundreds of seconds now away from what would be a very quick time from Ralf Schumacher, with Montoya currently fastest.
320 kilometers per hour for him, not as high as we saw yesterday. Montoya's done 328 kilometers now at that same point today. Cross the line, but he goes 2nd fastest, so we have Williams 1-2, Montoya a fraction ahead of Ralf Schumacher as they continue their work towards qualifying this afternoon. Still, we'll see big improvements. This was Raikkonen a moment ago, and that was what took him across the grass. Again, the back end of the car getting away from him. Coulthard's done the same.
Yes, 2 drivers in McLaren, both at the same corner, doing probably pretty much the same thing, indicating to me that McLaren are trying to sneak the downforce further forward. Now, that's something we know David Coulthard isn't so comfortable with. And that is, David's one was a lot more spectacular. He got away with that because there's gravel to the left of the McLaren, and he neatly did a nice pirouette and brought the car back, pointing in the right direction, engine running. But I suspect under braking, you can imagine just how unstable the back of the McLaren is, because certainly Raikkonen turned in and the back end came out, but Coulthard was almost going backwards before he got to turn in.
But I tell you what, watching Michael then, John, he locked up the front, but the back end stayed planted. It didn't let go like the McLaren seemed to.
Yes, but that's... I'll go quickly, is to give rear end stability first and foremost.
Well, it was a great demonstration of it right there, because Michael went in too quick and he still sorted it out. Now let's just watch him here. Michael Schumacher having a good run to finish off this session. 14th he was. That brings him up to first. Well, what about that for a final lap? He was 14th. He comes to the end of the session, takes the fastest time. There's still another 45-minute session to go, but that's just sent a ripple through the crowd here. A lot of Ferrari fans always in Canada, and that's just building up the excitement beautifully, with Williams versus BMW. Williams BMW versus Ferrari at the top of the timesheets. Michael going ahead of Montoya and Ralf Schumacher. Barrichello then fourth, then Raikkonen and Frentzen for Arrows. There he is, he's out of the car, but he ended up with the sixth fastest time there. Then it was Panis, Felipe Massa, Coulthard and Jacques Villeneuve in the top 10.
Well, in some ways that was the sort of flurry you would expect to see at the end of the 45-minute session leading into qualifying. This is the end of the first of the 45-minute sessions. We've got another one to go, and expect to see that time of Michael Schumacher 1:14.509 be further attacked by Williams, possibly McLaren, and also watch out for Arrows, for the Saubers, and possibly for Fisichella in the Jordan. They're not going to get into the top 4 or top 6, but they're going to be battling for those bottom 4 positions in the top 10.
Yes, it's going to be a massive battle to get into the top 10, and that's going to be a lot of the fun and games, I think, this afternoon in qualifying, is just who will make it into the top 10. A number of teams that have been there or thereabouts. We've had Toyota, BAR Honda, Jordan Honda, and it's going to be a really, really good battle, I think, all the way through that session. Everybody making their way back into the pits now then, so first 45 minutes are over, and we saw a very impressive performance from Felipe Massa. Felipe joins us. Great effort this morning, Felipe. Now, yesterday, I think you found the track a bit slippery, a bit dirty. How did you find the track this morning?
For sure, the track has improved a lot. Our car balance is quite good. I'm really happy about our car, and I think we can do the qualifying in the top 10s. I hope so. I think our car is quite good, and I'm really happy about.
Do you find that getting the brake balance on the car is more critical here than at any of the other tracks you've raced at this year?
Yes, for sure. On the brake balance is really important here, because we have a lot of really long straight and quite strong brakes. So I think it's really important for the race, the brake balance. But I hope we're gonna fight the brake balance. So until now, I think our brake balance is quite good.
Felipe, it's John Watson here. You had that horrible accident in Monaco when you had a brake problem. Have you got total confidence here in your brakes?
The brake in Monaco is different. It's a little bit more it's slower than here, so it's small brakes, and here we have a bigger brakes, and I think it's not gonna be a big problem. But my problem was, I think, the problem on the pads, because when I brake, the here pads is go off, and then I lost completely my brakes.
And did you have a stiff neck after that accident, Felipe? Because it was a pretty heavy impact.
Yeah, it was quite heavy, but just Monday I feel a little bit my neck, but it was no problem, and I'm quite good.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we're looking forward to your qualifying effort this afternoon. Let's take a look back over the highlights of this morning.